In this week's Torah portion, we read a special Torah portion for this Shabbat of Chol Hamoed Pesach. And in this Torah portion, it's very interesting. We start with the story of Moses going back, ascending the mountain for the second time. He has just finished, just before we start this Torah portion, the story goes that the Israelites were at Mount Sinai. They were waiting for 40 days and 40 nights for Moses, who was up on the mountain working on the 10 Commandments with God and taking them down from God's words. And when he came back down, what did he find? But of course, the story of the golden calf, where the Israelites they couldn't wait, and they created this golden calf made from melted gold jewelry and such, and they were praying to that golden calf, and he becomes so furious that he smashes the tablets. And this is where basically our Torah portion begins, is Moses reascends the mountain to get a second set of tablets from God to bring down to the people. It's a second chance. But what I find that's very interesting that happens here is Moses actually also has a kind of reaction that reminds me of what the Israelites had done before. So going back, the Israelites, they had what we could call a crisis of faith. They basically they couldn't wait. Those 40 days felt like forever. I mean, maybe, who knows? Like, sometimes the Torah says numbers, and we're supposed to just take from that a feeling or a relative experience. So maybe it wasn't 40 days. Like, who knows? Maybe it was a lot shorter than 40 days, but it felt like 40 days to them. That's a possibility, because it just felt like a really, I guess what it's trying to say, the Torah is trying to tell us, is that it was a really long time. It was a very too long a time for them. Now, you would think that the Israelites would actually have a lot of faith, because they had just been redeemed from slavery, and not in an ordinary way, in a super miraculous way. First of all of the plagues happened. And then, if that wasn't enough, they had the experience of the Red Sea splitting into two so that they could just walk right through it. I mean, if anyone had any doubts about the existence of God, who was once experiencing all of that, you would think, okay, so they're reassured in their faith. Not only that, they're getting food from God, they're getting manna in the desert. So you would think that they would be assured, but actually, is something that does really beings, and where they are without us and mess and worried, and being in that space of vulnerability, in that space of being open, and that space of believing through that feeling of anxiety. And they the choice to make this golden calf, to have something tangible, even though I can't imagine they really thought that was really God. They made it themselves. I don't know that, but that they wouldn't have thought it was had godlike powers. But to me, I mean, something that they've just created and they're standing in front of, it's hard for me to believe that they believed it in their heart. Moses goes up the mountain, and the first thing that he says to God is he says that he wants to see God. He says, "Oh, please let me behold your presence. Let me behold your presence. If I have gained favor in your eyes, then let me behold your presence." And that is really astounding, because it's actually not that different than the Israelites. Moses is asking to see God. Moses wants to really see that that God exists, and to see physical proof. That's what it seems like to me. I'm sure there are so many different understandings of this statement, but to me, it's very parallel to what the Israelites do. And God responds in an interesting way. God says, You cannot see me. That's not possible. But you can see my back. I'm going to put you, so there's this famous verse where God says to Moses, I'm going to put you in a cleft in the rock, go into that cleft in the rock, and and you once I've passed by you, you'll be able to see my back. And I think that is so fascinating because to me it sounds like a really perfect um, description of how we can experience spirituality in our lives. We cannot see God directly. We wish we could. It would make believing in faith so much easier. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we need to be vulnerable. And it is the only way that we can truly let God into our lives is to be so vulnerable that we let ourselves believe against all odds, against all kind of logics. Um, but we believe anyway, because believing is an experiential and emotional thing. Faith is emotional. It's not really something that can be argued so easily. If it was easy, we would all know the answer. But this is something that's been argued for centuries because it's very hard to put it into words. But we know it when we feel it and when we experience it. Just like breathing is important to the body, believing in faith is important to the soul. And so, where do we see God? We see God, um, we see the back of God, we see God through all kinds of expressions of love and of goodness in the world. And the Torah portion goes on to describe God. It says, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum, V'chanun, Erech Apayim, Gdol Chesed, V'emet. God, God, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. When we see those acts, when we are that way with each other, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, faithfulness, extending kindness to as far as we possibly can, forgiving transgressions in each other, we are seeing the back of God. We're seeing the effects of a spiritual life. So may you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to be open to the possibility, even if you don't believe, to be open and vulnerable enough to sit with that enough that and to look for the possibility of spirituality in the world and in your life.